Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today, we're discussing weight fluctuations during carb cycling and then more general weight fluctuations just during weight loss, any body composition transformations or goals, and what to expect when you're weighing in and how that's going to change over time.
Oh, the weight fluctuations.
This is always a common topic, isn't it?
It causes people so much stress, and I don't know how people don't know how normal it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It is strange for us, yeah, because we look at weight fluctuations and don't give it a second thought, whereas someone else that's especially like just beginning a weight loss journey, it can ruin their week.
Oh, I mean, yes, it will ruin their entire week to see a 0.5 increase on the scale,
right.
Which, you know,
if they're not getting low every time they stand on that scale, it's game over, right?
Well, and so, I mean, you have to think, like, your body's a dynamic system, right? Like, it's multiple systems all working together. 24 hours a day, things are changing. So you've got so many things happening inside, and then you've got so many external factors too.
Right.
You know, based on what your daily schedule looks like, what you're eating, what you're drinking. And unless you're doing everything the exact same, those fluctuations, it's normal for them to be actually pretty big. I mean, I would say the most average fluctuations are anywhere between 1 and 5 pounds. And that's average. So it can be greater than 5 pounds in some cases.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen upwards of like 8 to 10 even on certain weeks, depending on the size of the individual. Like, that's going to have a huge bearing on it. And then, like, you throw some other variables in there, like a carb-heavy, sodium-heavy meal, and you happen to drink a lot of water, which you should be drinking a lot of water.
Definitely.
And you've got that immediate short-term bump up in weight that just scares the crap out of people. And it's like, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's fine.
and I think, give a little disclaimer at the very beginning, because we're talking mostly about these fluctuations in response to a set program and,
yes,
carb cycling. Because, so in that regard, larger fluctuations can be normal if you have a bigger refeed or if you have a higher carb intake.
Yeah.
However, I get a little concerned with clients who we don't have a programmed refeed, or the carb fluctuations aren't that great, and we're seeing large swings in body weight or body water.
Right.
Because that can also tell us that something's not quite right. Maybe stress is higher, maybe water intake is low. There could be several different things going on. Inflammation, if you have digestive issues. So weight fluctuations can tell us a lot about what's going on, but in this regard, they're very normal and expected.
Yeah, and that is a good point to make. So obviously, if you're doing carb cycling, and we'll get into the details of that, these fluctuations are going to be bigger. That's not to say that you won't fluctuate if you've got a static macro amount.
You absolutely will still fluctuate. It'll just be smaller. I wouldn't expect 5+ pounds.
Right.
For someone who isn't carb cycling. If it is 5+ pounds, typically that means their body's not happy about something. Something else is going on.
Right. So for static macros, you're going to have a smaller fluctuation. It'll still be there, but because it all depends on what you're trying to get out of that goal. So if we're talking, and today we'll talk mostly in the realm of weight loss, by the end of the week, if you've got a static plan, you should still be getting through a lot of the stored glycogen that's in your body, because we're trying to burn through that stored energy, tap into the body fat, and obviously lose weight over time. And so that's going to require that slight caloric deficit, which is going to give you that type of process where you're burning through all of your energy at one point and refeeding back in to keep that process going. Now, with a carb cycle, this is going to be causing a lot more fluctuation, because instead of just having like maybe one day where you're bumping things back up to reset your metabolic rate and give you more energy for the rest of the week, we're doing a lot of different variations with the idea that we're trying to pretty much maximize the efficiency of the diet and marry the activity that you're doing to the carb intake. So if we're doing a static diet where it's just flat macros across the week, you're going to have days that you train, obviously, and burn more calories and create the deficit there. And then on the off days, if you are keeping things static, you're not going to have quite the same deficit because you're not doing the same activity. Whereas on a carb cycle, we're trying to push higher carbs on your hardest training days, and then on those off days, back off on the carbs to align with what the activity is that we're doing so that we can just give you enough to get through those tough workouts and then really take advantage of the off days by dropping calories and carbs specifically back down so that we're not overshooting on those days to maximize our fat loss.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people look for their progress to look like that straight line down.
Right.
And when you have these carb cycles built into your program, whether you're aware of what a carb cycle really does or not, we expect to see more of those fluctuations. So we don't expect it to look like a straight line down. We're expecting it to look more like, honestly, like a heartbeat even, where there's a lot of ups and downs, and then
Pretty
slowly over time, those ups and downs are falling and falling and falling. But it is basically just not a thing that happens to see someone progressively drop lower and lower and lower week to week. I've had maybe one client in all my years look like that.
You'll see that over a long period of time, but if you zoom in, it looks like this.
Well, yes.
So it's
sure.
Like
I mean, if you were like really zoomed out, I guess, yeah.
Right. So it's a zigzag down no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or unless you're somebody that's incredibly overweight and you're just starting a weight loss process and you start eating right from total crap before, then yeah, maybe you'll see a fairly linear trend initially, but especially as you get leaner and leaner, that's going to get much more jagged as you go. So why do carbs impact us so much with the way that we're altering the diet and the weight?
So your carbs chemically hold on to water in the body, right? They are your carbs are being stored typically in your muscles, in certain organs, but they attract water. So wherever they're being stored, they're also going to hold about 3 grams of water to 1 gram of carb. So that's triple. That's triple the amount of space and weight that's being held in your body with those carbs. So then if you think about going on a carb cycle where some days you're eating more of these carbs that attract more water, it makes sense that there's going to be more body weight fluctuations, but they're not body fat fluctuations. It's related to that water that the carbs are holding on to. Right.
Yeah. So your net weight change for every gram of carb that you consume is 4 times the weight of that carb because you're getting an additive 3 grams of water. And there's nothing you can do about that. Your body just holds on to that water.
It's not a bad thing. Here's the other thing that I feel like I need to say, because I have a lot of clients who get a little worried when I say, okay, your carbs hold on to water. And they're like, well, isn't that bad? Like, I don't want to retain water.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
water
wanna,
retention.
I don't want to be bloated. And it's like, no, it's completely different, right? So
totally
water held by carbohydrates should be held within those organs and within your muscle tissue, which actually ends up, for the most part, making a muscle look fuller and potentially more defined, just, depending on your relative body fat percentage. And that's a good thing, right? So that water is there to help with the processes happening within that muscle. It is a good thing. We want that water to be there.
Right.
Bloating and what we call water retention is typically happening outside the muscle tissue, subcutaneously, right? So that's what ends up making you look puffy or feel puffy. They are 2 completely different things.
And it's not to say that you can't spill over into subcutaneous.
Sure, you absolutely could if your hydration is
water
off.
And increased carbs. So yeah, it is possible that you take that, especially during a refeed, where everything kind of smooths out and you don't look quite as tight. That really is kind of getting into the art of bodybuilding and stage prep, and it's why it's so tricky. But that's beyond the scope of this. But
again, totally normal. Both of those things are totally normal, but they are slightly different things happening in the body.
Right. So just knowing that the increase in carb intake is going to, by default, change your overall weight, and it has nothing to do with body fat or anything else, should help start to put your mind at ease with this process. And so especially if we're going through these higher carb days or a refeed where we're really trying to push carbs up to get us reset for the next week, the day after you do that, you should weigh more if you're doing it properly. Now, there are instances where you might not, like if you were super depleted and then you refeed, you might not even weigh more. And that's depending on where you're at in your cut. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say that's definitely towards the end and towards the more extreme end.
That usually signals that you're about ready for whatever thing that you're preparing for, or you're probably about ready to enter a reverse and get back to maintenance at some point soon.
Yeah, you've either been way too low or you're peaking for something or whatever.
If you don't see those increases or those fluctuations anymore.
Right. And so when I'm actually looking at one of my clients' weight charts through the week, I'm actually looking for the day after that refeed to see a spike to know if we're refeeding enough. So just process that for a second. Like I'm actually looking for weight gain in the weight chart at specific days with people that I'm refeeding, because that tells me that we're actually getting glycogen and water back into the muscle tissue so that we can train hard again next week. Because if we're not refilling that, that's our energy. So every bit of glycogen is what we need to get through these intense workouts that we're doing. And if we're not refeeding enough there, then we're either going to need to push the refeed up, we're going to need to add a second one in during the week, or maybe we elevate carbs across the week as a whole. There's a number of things that we can do, but it's actually important that we're seeing that bump up so that I know we've got enough in the tank to push forward into the next week.
And do those workouts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So again, if you're working with the coach who has you on a carb cycle or, has you on refeeds, this is a signal of something good happening. This is not oh no, I went too far, or or like my cheat meal was too much or whatever. No, these are intentional changes that we're making to leverage how the body works to push you towards a new low. So again, the setup is so important. The setup for anything, I guess, that you do in life, the setup is so crucial, and that's what this carb cycle is about.
Yeah. And another way to look at this overall is it depends on how large you are as a person, but most people can store anywhere from 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates as a glycogen between muscle tissue, between the liver. Sometimes it might even be higher than that. Maybe you're pushing 500. I can't
remember what the liver. I think the liver itself holds.
The liver holds around the liver's like 80.
Is it?
Yeah, the liver is it's topped off pretty quick. The majority's in the muscle tissue, but
maybe I have them backward.
Regardless, so say we're at 400 grams of carbs that we can hold, and you've sufficiently filled all that up.
Pause for 1 second and point out, we're talking 200, 300, 400 grams of carbs that your body can store.
Yes.
Meaning you probably can eat more carbs than you think you can.
Oh, yeah.
And your body actually wants to use them as fuel, and those carbs aren't making you fat on the scale. Those carbs are filling your body's stores.
Right. If you've been used to just being depleted your whole life, then as soon as you eat carbs, you're going to refill all that. Yeah.
That's most of my clients eating 80 carbs a day.
It's not a bunch of weight gain.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to point that out. We're talking about hundreds of carbs that your body can store, meaning your body can even use more than that because you use carbs to get through your day every day.
Right.
So just want to keep that in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, your brain uses about 120 grams a day.
120 grams a day.
That's just your brain.
Just your brain. So if you're eating 80 grams of carbs a day for years, what do you think you're doing to your ability to think well and think clearly?
Might be a little irritable.
Probably a little irritable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
sorry. Continue.
No, you're good. Those were all good points. I'm glad you brought those up. So say we can store 400 grams of carbs. Well, that's another 1,200 grams of water. So we're at 1,600 grams, which is around 4 pounds.
Yeah.
And just that swing alone of filling those carbs up and burning through those during the week, that's a 4-pound swing right there. We're not even talking about additional water intake. We're not talking about fat loss. We're not talking about sodium or anything else. That's just plain and simple carbs that are coming into your body and that you're burning off. Now, you're probably never going to burn through literally all of them, but there's a pretty large swing there. And so that's going to be one of the major reasons why we're seeing a lot of these fluctuations through the week, and why your body isn't just, I was 190 today, and that's just what my body sits at forever. And then next week I'm 189, and then 180. It doesn't work that way.
No, we expect to see those peaks and valleys consistently throughout the week, which, a lot of, I would say, for the most part, we try to set these refeeds or these, like flexible meals and things over the weekend, which makes weighing in before the weekend very important. I know that by Thursday, Friday, a lot of, my clients personally, sometimes they forget, they don't get it done. And I'm like, that's your most crucial weigh-in of the week,
right.
is the end of the week weigh-in, because most people are pretty good during the week, and then the weekend are where things get a little dicey. So there are a couple reasons that we'd like to see an end of the week weigh-in. Number one, before you have a planned flex meal or a planned refeed, but then also before any potential slip-ups that might happen over the weekend.
Sure.
Because I don't want you thinking you're not making progress if you're only ever weighing in Monday morning, when a handful of things that happened over the weekend are maybe contributing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so whether it's planned or not planned, please weigh in before the weekend to give yourself like that gratification that you're actually making progress.
Yeah, I like to typically have 2 or 3 throughout the week, just to monitor what those fluctuations are, especially if we're doing the carb cycle. Because, and I mean, if you are somebody that loves data and you want to weigh in every single day, that's perfectly fine, as long as your expectations are realistic. If you're coming into this thinking, I'm going to lose weight every single day, you're going to drive yourself insane.
Nope, doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't work that way. But knowing, because what you'll tend to find if you are on a very regular plan is that the days that your weight is elevated and drops is the same each week. And there might be some small variations to that, but overall, you'll see the same kind of trend going on through the week if you're consistent. And so one of the things that I'm always looking at progress-wise is new low points. And one of the reasons why I stress this with my clients so much is because the low point, if we're consistent and we're not doing anything out of the ordinary as far as like being extra dehydrated or fasting for a day just to try to artificially make a low count, because obviously that's not a true value.
That's not accurate.
As long as we're doing the same things consistently through the week, that low point is going to be indicative of progress. Whereas the high point, I don't really care about, because that's going to only tell me that we're refeeding enough. And the amount of discrepancy there between the amount of carbs that you're consuming, your hydration status that day, and the saltiness of the food or anything else can make your high points continue to stay the same or even elevate during weeks that you're continuing to drop body fat. And so that's where I'm looking for that elevation point to tell me, do we have energy for next week? Yes, you did that. You went up in weight. Good. And then I'm looking at what's that low point that we're reaching every single week to make sure that the macros are where they need to be and all of our training is aligned with those numbers.
Absolutely. I had something that I was going to say and then I totally lost it in the end of your...
High point, low point. Was I just talking too long?
No, I don't know. I just lost it. But I do think another good thing to point out are maybe some of the other reasons that we might expect fluctuations or see fluctuations. And a big one, I think, that's really important to talk about is for women. So with hormonal fluctuations.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing. Whenever I'm looking at a woman, like a female client's weight chart, I'm expecting to see actually more fluctuations than I might see in a man's chart, because I know to expect at certain times during the month. And this isn't just once a month either. I mean, these are fluctuations that happen periodically throughout all 4 weeks of a month. There's going to be differences. So, working with a client, you start to see patterns probably in the first 2 to 3 months of what that's going to look like for her specifically. But that's another thing that you have to keep in mind, and why mindset and consistency are so key and important, because, people get really discouraged when they see those fluctuations. But if you let that fluctuation push you off track, that's when you're going to have problems. So there is a little bit of trust that you need to have with staying consistent and just knowing that like your body is going to be where you need it to be, and we see those single point lows. So in that situation, we might see those new lows even less than a man client. Not always, but potentially, depending on like what someone's hormone status looks like.
Men are definitely easier.
Yes, they
No
are.
question.
So like for me, when I'm looking for these new lows for a female client, I might actually only look for a truly new low maybe twice a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then know that like we'll compare the other weeks to the previous month's weights during those same, points of the cycle, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This is a long-term process.
It is a long-term process.
No matter who you are. And so getting caught up in the day-to-day changes is just going to drive you insane. Even if you're looking at like a pound or 2 pounds per month and you continue that on long enough, you're going to make the transformation. Mm-hmm. And yeah, while that's not as great as 5 pounds per week or whatever else you see people doing, progress is progress, and you can only get what your body will allow you to get out of it. And so comparing yourself to other people is goofy.
Don't ever do it.
And really just starting to understand how your body reacts to these changes over time is really important. And that's something that as a coach, we have to learn too. So I get the question all the time of like, well, how much weight do you expect me to lose in the length of our program?
From every client.
And it's like, while ideally we shoot for like 1 to 2 pounds per week maybe, and obviously that can change depending on if I've got somebody that's just trying to lose 12 pounds versus somebody that's got 150 to lose, that's going to change. But it also depends on so many other things and just how your body takes to these things. And it takes a month or two to really even get a grasp of how your body relates to these changes. I mean, even a 3-month, 6-month period is such a short window.
It is.
When we're talking about actual weight loss and lifestyle change. And yeah, I know everybody wants to jump in and their first month they're down 12 pounds and they're looking great and they love it. And that happens. I mean, there's not to say that can't happen, but it's definitely not the norm. And really finding what's sustainable and what that approach is that you can take that gives you those results that you're after, and understanding the realistic expectation of changes in weight through the week and through the month based on how you're eating. And these are fluctuations based on you following the plan perfectly, much less you actually going off plan
erratic
and then throwing a couple drinks in there and whatever else. And that's not to say that won't happen either. But having a realistic expectation, understanding that fluctuations on a perfect plan happen and are planned for, and then understanding that you'll probably vary even more than that because nobody's perfect. And understanding that, you'll be in a much better headspace to see progress and not drive yourself crazy with this process.
Yeah, well, that's another really good point is, again, we're talking about you following this plan to a T, which life happens. You're human, and that's just not realistic. You're not going to be 100% every day, every week. And so you do have to be honest with yourself and weigh your level of compliance against, the goals that were set, and read any fluctuations through that lens as well. Because obviously, the more inconsistent you are, the more fluctuations that will happen. And then if you let those fluctuations based on your inconsistencies throw you off track, you just killed it for yourself. So don't sabotage yourself. Consistency is always the goal, and it's unrealistic to think that people are going to be perfect. But that's what you have to keep reminding yourself is give it your best shot, do as well as you absolutely can, and try and bring some level of consistency day to day and week to week, and then judge your progress based on that.
Absolutely. Well said. Anything else to add?
I don't think so. Well, actually, yeah, I guess one more thing would be back to what you said before of figuring out what works for you, because everybody is so individual. So giving yourself enough time to find out what it's going to look like for you instead of being like, okay, so-and-so lost, this many pounds in this short of a time doing this program. We've talked about before that your experience on a certain program is going to be very unique to you and so much different than what anyone else's experience is on the same exact plan.
Yeah.
But you really need to give yourself the best shot. Like, don't sabotage yourself. I guess I can't say that enough. I would say give yourself at least 3 months on whatever program it is that you try.
Mm-hmm.
To figure out what those patterns look like for you, to build some level of consistency, and then make an executive decision if that's working for you or not.
Yeah, this isn't a 1 week or 2 week, let's see if it's working.
No,
and jump
that
to
kills
something
so
else.
many people's goals because they jump from plan to plan to plan, and they try all these different things, and they only gave themselves 7 to 10, 50% effort days. You really need to give yourself enough time. And if going into the program, you already know for a fact, this seems like too much for me, then don't try it.
Yeah.
Find another program that feels more realistic to you.
Yeah.
Because if you can stick to something that feels less aggressive at, 80 to 90% consistency rather than something that's super intense for 40 or 50%, choose the lower intense one, right? Go for the one that seems more realistic to you.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. Having an understanding that this is going to take time, giving yourself enough time to actually run with something, and not seeing these weight fluctuations as something that you're screwing up and then completely altering your plan the next week to compensate for it.
Yes.
Because if the plan's put together well and these are things that are accounted for, then you're going to just be completely taking the legs out from under the plan. Because we want to keep your calories as high as we can for as long as we can. And if you're just seeing this water fluctuation bump up 1 week and then you're like, well, I need to cut out carbs completely next week, don't do it. Just do not do that. So hopefully this has given you a good understanding of what this process looks like, what to actually expect, and can kind of put your mind at ease through this whole weight loss journey, because you're never going to see that perfect slope. It's never going to happen that way.
Which is unfortunately why you just have to stay consistent and trust some sort of process, which is hard to do. I get it. We're all about instant gratification and we want to see results, but realistically, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And anybody that ever achieves the weight loss that they're looking to achieve and maintains it understands that this is a very long-term thing. Even if you saw the initial weight loss from a crazy diet up front, if you're not maintaining it, it doesn't matter. You'll be right back where you started. So yeah, that's weight fluctuations. That's carb cycling. That's how it all fits together through your week. So hope you guys enjoyed. If there's anything you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out to myself at hypertrofit.com. You can find Alexa at therootedrd.com, and we'll see you guys again next week.
We'll see you guys next week.